We are live.
There we're live. This is Senate Appropriations February 10th. We are trying to close out the budget adjustment act of fiscal year 26. We have Jennifer here with us to work through the spreadsheet of things that we didn't close out. And a couple of small changes from yesterday's Friday's discussion.
Cool. Do you want me to go through the big spreadsheet first or go through some of these other little things? Just close out things like transfers.
You can introduce yourself for the record and then you can decide which you think is best.
Great.
We want to go.
Sure. Emily Burns in the Joint Fiscal Office. Why don't we do like this? It's now Tuesday to like warm up. We'll do the transfers and the direct apps first.
Extras.
You're all good with that.
The sheet that you have in front of you is just a high-level overview of the transfers and the direct applications in the FY26 budget. At the top in blue, these are transfer changes. The ones with the boxes checked that are grayed out, those were things that were in the as-passed 26 budget that are not changing in the budget adjustment. This is like, so you have a full accounting about everything, but these are the ones that are grayed out are not changing. The two at the bottom, so rows 10 and 11, for the two that were proposed to be changed in the budget adjustment. So the governor on line 10 recommended transferring about $1.6 million to the Criminal History Records Check Fund.
From the
general fund, because there is a structural deficit in that fund. And so I believe that's something we've talked about and agreed to, but that's here at account for transfers. And then same with line 11 was a general fund transfer of about $67,000 to the pilot special fund. That was determined that was not necessary. So that was in the governor's recommend. And then the House did not fund it, which is why there's negative 70,000 in the Senate, in the House difference from the governor's column for the House, and then it's 0 in the Senate column. So we're concurring with the House's proposal to.
And that was also general fund. There was a transportation fund part of it, but that
Correct.
Doesn't show up in this.
That one, this is just the transfers from the general fund. So that's, yes, there's a transportation fund component. So that's all the transfers.
Okay.
Pretty straightforward.
Does anybody have any questions on them? I assume we can just close those out. Not talk about transfers.
Great. I'm not talking to them ever again. Until the next time, sorry about that.
Yes.
Okay. And then down below that in orange, you have the updated direct applications. So this is money in special funds that's being transferred into the general fund. The two, again, same as above, the two that are grayed out, those ones aren't changing from what was passed in the FY26 budget. The following 5 are changing. And they're mostly going up a little bit based on updated estimates and more information. So the Gov had updates to what's coming from the Cannabis Regulation Fund and the General Fund, changes in the Department of
These are
Financial
money from the direct app to the general.
to the General Fund. So coming out of the Cannabis Fund to the General Fund,
Okay.
from the Department of Financial Regulation Fund. So this is the short insurance regulatory and supervision fund, the Securities Regulatory and Supervision Fund, and the Captives Insurance Fund. It's a net because there's actually a little bit of general fund going to the Captives Fund. But a lot of money coming from the other two, so they increased that transfer by $2 million.
And it's just because they have more information than later in the year.
Correct. Some of these were updated a little bit after the revenue downgrade happened. To get the budget back in balance in January. Increase coming from unclaimed property. There is a reduction in the amount coming from sports wagering, just based on how people are betting and what's coming in from that. And then an increase from the liquor control fund. So there's about $4.9 million worth of additional direct apps as compared to the budget as passed. The House accepted all the changes that the governor put forward, and then presumably the Senate will accept all those changes put forward.
Any questions on the direct app?
Great.
Do not. We will close those direct app things out. So we talked about it, so should not be an issue there.
Right, the next two we'll talk about are the reversions. I should get this out. Sure.
Budget adjustment trees
into them.
well, I think we can pass the bill.
Well, regardless, which you.
Okay, so we just went over these things, the transfers and direct debits, which we've talked about before, but let's close those out.
Any money in here for transportation?
No,
Oh, that, then I don't like.
okay, so now we're on the green top sheets.
Did none of them go around?
Budget adjustments.
Yours?
Yeah, so I figured I can put on.
Happy birthday.
Oh, sorry.
Is it your birthday, really?
It is.
No,
Happy birthday.
Why did,
oh, look at that.
why wasn't it?
It should have been on the floor.
Yeah.
You
I think it was 9:30.
Who overlooked that?
probably paid her off.
I'm gonna cut myself a piece and pass.
She, I can't believe she messed up on that.
Right,
No.
well,
She's supposed to be in charge of
In
all
the
of that.
complaint box.
okay,
All right, this next one is another easy one. This is a list of all of the reversions of prior year appropriations that are being reverted in the budget adjustment or were reverted for the statutory authority given to the Commissioner of Finance Management, where he can determine what gets, or that's not statutory authority, sorry, it's session law, but at the end of typically the budget adjustment, authority is granted to the Commissioner of Finance to decide if what gets carried forward and what doesn't. So most of these, a few of these were in the bill as passed, but most of these were reverted per that authority. So there's not a lot of jurisdiction, if you will, over these. These reversions have already happened, but to the extent they've happened, they become available sources for the general fund and for the budget adjustment. So in the original governor's recommended budget adjustment, there was an additional $21.1 million worth of reversions for a total of $31.2 million worth of reversions. You can see the as passed column, what you guys had assumed when the FY26 budget was passed, and then all of the additional reversions.
this number's the same, that was when the governor's recommend, he didn't have the list. Governor's recommend the VA just had that 21 million, that's the same number, like that
Yes.
number hasn't changed.
The number has changed, yeah. And then if you go to the back. After the revenue was downgraded, there were some additional reversions identified by the governor to balance the budget. These ones, because they were reverted for the authority exercised at year-end close, they are included in the budget adjustment act. There was an additional $4.6 million worth of reversions, which brings the total reversions to $35.9 million in FY26, which is $25.8 million over and above what was assumed when the 26 budget was built.
Did you?
Okay, sorry, I was distracted by
By the cake?
cupcakes.
Yeah.
Is there a difference between the ones on the back and the front, or just they're just bigger because you have more room? There's no difference.
There's no difference. The only difference is these reversions were identified when the revenue was downgraded. So it's sort of, it was after the original budget adjustment.
So the front are the updated one.
The back, page 2 is the updated.
Oh, page 2 is the updated. Yes.
That's the update. And they were all new ones. Okay.
Yes, there was.
Yeah, I didn't realize that my benchmark had.
Yeah, that's 67,000 remaining in that. Yeah, I saw that the first time, but I guess it was. Could have done a few more incentives.
Did they get cut in this year's budget?
Yeah, they just get funded, yeah.
They didn't get funded.
Yeah, we got zeroed out, so they just cleared out the account.
I hate the fact that that didn't get funded.
Yeah, it was a good program. Now, there was a couple other programs like that, that had a little bit of money, could have done a little more than they got cut. I didn't remember what the Secretary of State had for ranked choice voting. You know what's that? Secretary of State had money for ranked choice voting in the 2024 Act 78. I guess they had $100,000 left. Maybe they were gonna do a. That is steady. Okay,
Okay, that's it for that one.
so this is, we're agreeing with all these numbers.
Yeah.
We have,
So the Capitol Police on line 17.
Yeah.
Could make a donation,
Well, they're making a donation to the general.
yeah, 99.
99 cents.
99 cents. We did our best to fully spend it down. So we couldn't burn the
It's
last.
got about a paper.
What are they gonna do without the
What is
99 cents?
security is not listed, doesn't have the department.
It's the legislature though. It was from that's an old appropriation. That was from 2013.
$39.
$39 left. And this one was in the budget as passed. There were a couple that when we were building the legislative budget last year, we cleaned up that 39 and the 99 cents that's there. Just gonna hang out there until you actively revert them. So now they are cleaned up,
Actively revert.
actively.
I wanna ask about the forced highway, but I won't. It's only 79 cents.
Well, one after was, it's 20 cents.
20 cents, yeah. You're keeping track of the penny, a dollar, take care of themselves. Okay,
You can ask Commissioner Gresham.
Penny savings and penny earned.
okay.
Okay, and then the last spreadsheet. I have the big spreadsheet that we've gone through with pretty much everything grayed out. I also made a copy that has took off all the grayed out stuff, so it's just a couple, it's much shorter and only one page. I don't know if there's a preference. I'll do the one.
Yeah, hang the figure out.
If there's questions on details, we can,
You can look at your sheet that we checked off for next year.
hopefully it'll be easier to read. Okay, so starting at the top, the gray boxes is just the base budget, and we don't have to talk about that. But we'll start with line 31. This is sort of the last thing that typically gets changed in the budget and in the budget adjustment, but it's the net impact of all the changes in the global commitment appropriation. Sometimes you go through them individually at this point.
We tried to close it up yesterday or Friday, and you said we should wait.
Yes.
Now we can close it.
Cool. Great.
We're not making any other changes that will affect the global.
Great. So then this is where they're all hidden. So on line 69, this is the Meals on Wheels. So on Friday, you had talked about adding $50,000 to the Meals on Wheels appropriation that the House made. So the House made a $30,000 appropriation. If you add 50, that takes the Meals on Wheels additional grant funds up to $80,000. You recall this was funded through two ways. One, we reduced, this will come up on line 98 below, but reduced the $400,000 for Vermonters feeding Vermonters by $40,000. And then there was about $15,000 bottom line. So we increased appropriation to, that's the remaining $10,000 in the funds for meals. Is from the bottom line. So that's an additional 50 for Meals on Wheels.
Okay. Any questions on that? We'll close that out.
Yeah.
Okay, close out 69. Line 330.
I had the Health Department recovery assistance line open still. Maybe do you remember why?
You wanted to talk about the distribution?
that line, maybe?
Right, a distribution of funds to each of the organizations, and I think if you leave it as it is, it's fine.
Yeah, so we're gonna agree with the House
Yeah,
on that, close that out.
Great.
Agency that culture, stuff, Vermonters.
We just talked about. We just talked about that.
Talking about that, we can close that one out. Contingent appropriations, what was that?
Yeah, so this one is a net zero. So in the House, you'll recall this is related to, yeah, the title's a little fun. The House, because there's $50 million appropriated for utilization by the emergency board in the event that federal funds were reduced. The House designated about $5 million of that funds for Section 8 housing.
Oh, I see.
Needs. We have draft language, we can talk about related to Section 8 housing. I can talk about it right now, or talk about when we go through the language, but there has since been a federal appropriations bill. The amount of money that the housing authorities are gonna get is not yet finalized. There's like a 60-day period between when the appropriations bill passes and when this passes. We have proposed language that would, rather than set aside $5 million of that fund, designate that the emergency board, in the event there is a change or a need for Section 8 housing vouchers, the emergency board, if the General Assembly is out of session, can appropriate funds to prevent the loss of housing vouchers. So it doesn't create a distinct appropriation for this purpose. You'll recall Finance Management had said reduce the contingent appropriation and make an explicit appropriation if that's what you choose to do. This makes it a little more, this doesn't make it explicit, but it says like the emergency board can do it if needed. And then the language that says this is how the program would be structured if it existed, says if the emergency board does this, then this is how the program should be structured.
Would that create any timing issues for any of this money? I was convinced that they need the money to be able to maintain the same level of vouchers, and I want them to get their money. If the federal money comes through, that's all well and good. If the federal money isn't there, could we just do a trigger and say they automatically get the 5 million? If it's during the legislative session and we've got to run a whole bill through that, and that took us 2.5 months to get there, does that put them in a bad position? I'm not opposed to the emergency board having control of this. I just don't want them sitting there for 2 or 3 months if there's no need to.
Right, I think.
Make any sense?
the trigger.
Yeah,
Do you want me to?
Well, we could put it in the FY 27 budget, but if there is a timing thing. It seems like there was support from the House, from the governor's office, and from the Senate. Well, we haven't gone to the full Senate, but at least from here to do the money. So I figure we wouldn't have to like do the whole bill process. We could do something quickly to get in the budget.
I think regardless, we want them to have the 5 million.
Or whatever, we don't know what the right dollar amount is, so it's like that. This also gives us some time for the conference committee. So if we have more information by the time we're sitting in conference committee, we could change it then too. And it turns out they do need 5 million or 3.7 or whatever. The goal is just, I think everybody's in agreement that they have to get rid of vouchers and increase the amount of vouchers, then we don't want. We'll use them.
I'm totally in agreement with that, and I would say this is going to go to conference, and you'll discuss it in conference and everything. I would just say I don't want them. If we get to the point where if they found they've got the federal money, I'm okay with that going away. If the federal money isn't coming through, I'm fine with the construct that the House wants to.
Isn't that what you just said, though? The language would be?
The language would move it to the emergency board. It wouldn't set aside a fixed amount. of money.
Right.
But the emergency board only when the legislature is not setting.
It could be in FY 27, it could be in the C section of FY 27, so it happens kind of on passage.
There is a challenge though, I think, with the timing, like, it's- we don't have the final, we don't know what the full impact is of the federal funds. The federal funds isn't going to fund all the vouchers that we've had historically. Question is just the level of, like, how many vouchers do we think will get funded with the federal appropriation as established, which we don't have the exact number yet for each public housing authority. And then, once we know that number, then you might have like better idea of how much money to set aside for this purpose.
I just want them to get their money.
Yeah. There might be more than 5 million. I think 5 million also was an estimate. Because we don't have a limit on the language that you'll see later about what the report would have. But we, like I said, this opens it up for conference. We'll have more information. If they need the money, we'll give them the money.
Right, and the 50 million is currently e-board.
The board already.
Yeah,
But we had,
But, yeah,
we specifically call it out just to highlight the issue. Okay, so we can
check it.
close that.
Grant had one gradient, what's his term? And then the last one is new, is for DS payment reform. There's been some conversation about, additional language needed for DS payment reform that Grady has,
Services.
disability services, which some people refer to it as the designated agencies needs, right? This is related to the designated agency.
Some people just call it payment of fund.
Disability services payment reform specifically. So this, there's been some negotiations and some figuring out of things that, it's estimated that the change in the payment that's needed to make sure that the designated agencies have the cash flow they need, to stay afloat is about a little over $9 million.
Yeah.
Okay, a little over $9 million of total gross general fund and federal funds. It's about $3.9 million of state funds. My understanding is in conversations with the Agency of Human Services, they're going to look to either fund it within their existing budget, and if they get to year end and they don't have enough money, that they would look to the Human Services caseload reserve as a way to ensure that there's enough money to meet AHS's appropriations. I will pull up, I should have done this before, but I will pull up how much money is in the Human Services caseload reserve. I don't know, spreadsheet I have here.
This was just for the committee. This was the amendment Senator Lyons brought Friday. This changes that around a little bit. So later when we go to the language, we'll have more details.
But yeah, so you won't have to,
But the DAs that the House funded would still get their funding. Just kind of how they.
but this would. So the projected balance in the Human Services case order, I haven't updated this yet. Projected at the end of 2026, when we passed last year's budget, was $91 million. In the case order. So this would, if they just can't find any other money in their budget, come close out, it would be a $3.9 million need from it just to cover it. And it is a one-time, my understanding is it's a one-time payment that once they once they more operationalize this program, there will be reconciliations based on actual services provided. It will help with the cash flow needs. That's what we got on that.
Good.
Cool. Great.
Close that.
And I think that's basically it. We talked about the 2 transfers, the boxes checked that are below. I didn't have those ones, but we just talked about those on the transfer sheet. The revenue picture is the same as it was in the governor's update after the revenue downgrade, and then what the House did. We do all of those things because you spend an extra $10,000. You're $10,000 higher than the House in terms of spending, but The amount reserved, this leaves $74.91 million on the bottom line to be carried forward into FY 27. There's language in the budget adjustment that says it shall be used for property tax relief, federal funding needs, or other items identified. Just the same amount that the governor had.
Right. So we're not changing that.
That's everything on the numbers.
Any questions on the numbers, either on this sheet or from our sheet from Friday? People have questions on it? Yes.
Going back to the sheet,
Yeah,
can you just, I think I need one more time, what
all that is.
it is.
Yeah, just these are all prior year appropriations that the Commissioner of Finance either in the FY 26 budget has passed. So if they're in this column, it was already kind of tagged in the budget when we passed it. Or through the authority that's granted to the Commissioner of Finance and Management in the budget adjustment pretty much every year that says the Secretary of Administration, in consultation with Finance and Management, can determine what is carried forward and what is not. If it's not carried forward, it's reverted to the general fund. So these are the list of things that were reviewed by Finance and Management that they determined should be reverted and get reverted for that authority. And so they've already been reverted, but it's available revenue for reappropriation in the budget adjustment.
And so one hypothesis is that these monies they still existed because they had been unspent or they were not encumbered or whatever.
Yeah.
And so, okay, I think that is,
A lot of times the program is run as force and there's $58 left that they're not gonna be able to spend or.
yeah, I guess
That's usually what's happened.
I realize this is going back to this other sheet, but thinking about like the brownfields, that's $2 million. Like it seems unusual that you have $2 million just hanging out. Yeah. So anyway, these are some questions.
Yeah, sometimes I think it's, the program is run for a certain period of time. There's money still sitting there and maybe it doesn't align with the priorities of the administration anymore. And for the authority they have, they can make that choice. So
we don't necessarily have a choice over that.
Well,
or
we could
just
object to the referral, but
you would have to reappropriate it.
back to that. If for the same purpose, you have to reappropriate back to the same purpose.
well, we could reappropriate it somehow.
To anyway.
Yeah, where you want.
In order to get it to those people who haven't used it, we'd have to reappropriate them.
If you want to give it back to brownfield, for example.
First,
Right, but this is FY 26, so they're not, maybe they just weren't going to use it. They could have just carried forward if they were going to use it 27, but maybe they have a different plan.
yeah.
So the finance and management goes out to all the agencies and says like, look in the couch cushion.
Right.
And they know, they have all the books that mentioned, like, looks like you have 2 million in this account. Are you really going to spend that this
Right.
year? And sometimes they have tense conversations between them, like, we want to take that
Sure.
money. And they're like, no, we're holding on to it. And then they're like, no, you work for us. Give us all the money.
There you go.
Yeah, Senator Ruth.
I have a similar question, and I apologize if I missed this, but 46 and 47, the Vermont Land Access Opportunity Board. So we're reverting $1 million, but we're also reverting 240,000 from the floor. Is that right?
They reverted it. And then they decided they didn't want to revert it, but they'd already reverted it. So we have $1 million appropriation to the LAOB.
But what about the 240 for the board?
I think that's just 20 years.
Yeah, that's
Oh.
24%. This one is not, this is
not
the penny.
I did.
Unlike all the other sheets,
Got it.
that one's for the penny.
Okay. That makes
Yeah, so that was an example of finance management looking through accounts and then they're like, oh, let's revert that money. And then the land access board said like, no, actually we have a program. We just put out these applications. Yeah. We need that money back. And then they agreed, but they'd already reverted it.
Okay.
We put it back. They took it and we put it back. That's all. Same thing. Okay.
Great.
I don't know if you want to stay there. I was going to go through
Sure.
some of these things that were on the worksheet that some reason the worksheet that I had was the wrong, but I don't have, it's this. This,
You got from that.
you got from that we got from Adam Gresham on the first one.
Yeah.
So on this worksheet. But we're doing it. Stable, my thought in the points. It is that. It's this one.
December.
But I have a little cheat sheet of the one we got. Have open. Yeah, December 16th, 2026. So this is just to. They're special funds, but this. We already went over anything that's in the general fund. So if you're looking at the worksheet, there are ones where there's money coming out of special funds. So just to make sure everybody, no has question on this. There's the Cannabis Control Board, the 630,150. This returns money from that special case, which actually was on English. There's a child development transfer. This is net neutral, just moving it between.
What section is that?
That's B318.
Okay, so what's happening to this?
See how there's, if you go over to the comments, there, moving money between request counter.
Oh, right, yeah.
From the counseling support to family services. And do you have anything else? Mike?
It's just moving from child development to family services. So it's just in the wrong debate. So the correct one.
We are the next one is B320. The bottom of that same page. And this is a global commitment adjustment. You could read the quotes there, the notes. It's a $5,000 net for those changes. The next one is B323 on the next page. This is the reach. This is an internal accounting correction. Basically. Realigning the data earnings. That's $135,000. Then B325, the next line down. It's $127,000 net. Payment support of housing. Partially funded on base. Yeah, this is kind of ARPA funding ending, so we're putting general fund needed to cover these costs. We're putting into that special. Next one's B334.1. This is at the bottom of that same page. Dale. This 28. This involves the veterans home things, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. Choices for care. These are the series. This is EREV. There's several ups and downs in that section. So they're global commitment. About that. And then there's $1 million from this B508. We had talked about this, but we never really closed it out, where the nutrition, the lunch program needed less money than budgeted, so they are funding $1 million from the ed fund to the general fund. And then there's 500,000 for the pilot fund. This is B one hundred C. That's the very back, the last, not the last page, but page 7. The number 5, the fourth one down in there. Okay. No. Where's the sheet? You guys can see two. Oh, no, yeah, it's the first one, page 7, at the very top.
That's a good question.
Yes.
This may be just a procedural thing, but in B508 about the education fund with the nutrition and refunding $1 million, it's less than that demand, but it's going from the education fund back to the general fund. I just want to note that it seems a little odd that we might be buying down property taxes to give to the education fund and here we're reverting money from the education fund. It seemed like there could be like at least this $1 million internal shift to keep the $1 million in the education.
Okay, maybe instead of,
It does stay in the education.
Oh, it's not going to
It
the,
doesn't go in, yeah, it's
not going to.
No.
it just stays within.
it's a reduction in the appropriation in the education fund,
Okay.
and then it just
So
drops
just
to the
stay-
bottom line. Yeah.
Of the Indian fund.
Okay,
No,
thank you. That's all.
it's just an adjustment, not a transfer. Okay.
All right, thank you.
And we had talked about 500,000, the rate that tax department needs for the telephone personal property tax work. But those were ones that were adjustments to special funds that we hadn't talked about because they don't show up in that general section. That in my law. I didn't think there was anything in there that he was worried about or was concerned about. I thought we should just mention. Do you have questions, Sarah? Okay. So with that, we can go to the language. Reading. Mystery. Goodbye. Yeah.
You can keep it if you want it.
Oh, you got it.
Thank you.
That's word.
Yeah. Okay, take it away. Who are you?
My name is Grady Nixon, JFO. Pleasure to meet you all. So I have a brief language packet that should encompass all changes JFO believes the committee will be making. There are a few points in this packet that I'll defer to committee members to discuss the language, as there are proposals being brought forward by a particular member of the committee. And then there's one that we drafted that I'm not sure if I just drafted it. I'm not sure if the committee's going to make a decision either way on that one. So first we have changes to the B1100 section. On the first page in that highlighted sub 5, you'll see the appropriation itself here is not being added by the Appropriations Committee, just the language clarifying that this is a one-time payment, one-time payment increase. So the appropriation existed. This is that one part of.
Thank you.
This is one part of that non-emergency medical transportation funding. This is the match, and then later on you'll see the global commitment. So this just addresses the committee's request to clarify that it is a one-time payment increase and also technical letter changes.
So this highlighted number 5 is just the non-emergency transport.
Correct. So this is the change here is the wording of one-time payment increase.
Okay.
On page 2, so this is that proposed change I mentioned before, where there had been some offline discussion about altering this appropriation to $250,000 general fund for a grant to establish a new women's recovery residence. The highlighted language is language Jacob drafted for those discussions, but I will defer to the committee members on if they would like to take this up.
You want to say anything about this, Norms?
In reference to 50,000.
The 50, now we're changing what up to 50 can be.
Right, it's not, we have spoken about this, it's up to 20%. The problem they're running into is that some use monies toward operational cost on this grant. So we're imploring people to go along with this particular $50,000 for operational cost. I believe we were also looking to bring something else up in this, just in reference to the other parts of the grant where the monies could be used. There's a total of 250,000.
Yeah, that'll
we
be-
allocated last year.
Yeah, the way that Grady wrote this was like, because it's within the program, CCD, the Vermont Recovery Housing Program, you can't use any money for operations, admin. This allows them to use it for activities otherwise in the program. So basically lets them use it for anything. The 250 to 200 of the grant would still be restricted by the housing program, which they can use with some of the capital stuff we talked about before. But this would also allow them to use 50,000 of the grant for activities that normally they wouldn't be allowed to use for some of their startup costs, if it's new women's recovery. So we had given them money thinking they needed to buy the building, but they got another grant, so they don't need as much for purchases. For my opinion.
Yes.
Okay.
On the bottom of that page, you'll see proposed change from the chair regarding the appropriation to the Land Access and Opportunity Board. So rather than including multiple Land Access and Opportunity Board programs, including Homes for All 2, this would revise language to say that those funds are for the Homes for All initiative and for community resilience grants.
So when you do this editing, you're editing the FY26 bill. So you'd like stuff that the House added. You don't have crossouts. It just doesn't show up.
Right. So this appropriation was not originally in the bill. So when you change language that the House added, it doesn't get reflected as an amendment to the House language.
Okay. Yeah, not just, as Greg said, more in line with how the Land Access Opportunity Board was planning using money for the resilience grants.
On page 3 of this packet, at the very bottom, you'll see this is the global commitment portion of that non-emergency medical transportation funding. So again, just altering the language again to reflect that it is a one-time payment increase. And then on page 4, this is reflecting the committee's alteration of the increase to the appropriation to the Vermont Food Bank that the House made. So the revised number in the House bill was 900,000. The committee has reduced that increase by 40,000. So the number reflected here is now 860,000. On page 5, I will defer to the President Pro Tempore.
Yeah, so I did discuss this language with administration, and they are okay if we make a single change. So where it now says necessitated by increased federal deployments, we settled on by increased federal action in Vermont.
So it's changed from what Grady had here.
What Grady has here, after federal deployments were changed to action in Vermont.
Still appearing.
Yeah.
Any questions? And now I'm people clear with that.
Just got a quick one.
Sure.
Is this an unending amount of money, or is it just 5 million, or what is it?
It's from the 50 million.
Yep.
And this is adding a possible use, but it all has to go through the e-board. And the administration has to bring a request to the e-board, yes?
So the agency of administration request is covered in that reference to section E 127.2. So this would be e-board action outside of that
I see.
context.
So in terms of who could initiate this request if we're not in session,
The emergency board,
anybody on the emergency.
as currently drafted, yes.
Okay. And I think that's how I would.
Okay.
So that answer your question, Paul?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Moving on.
On page 6, so throughout this language, you'll see some updates to the section 8 language that Emily was discussing a moment ago. Again, this is just removing the specific allocation. So it had previously reflected that of that 50 million, 5 million would be for section 8. This updates the language to say that in fiscal years 2026 and 2027, while the General Assembly is not in session, the E-Board has the authority to transfer part of that appropriation, again, referring to that 50 million. And then further changes in the language just reflect that. So now sub B leads in with if funds are transferred for this purpose, rather than citing the agency of administration. Same with sub C and sub D. So rather than referencing the agency of administration, it now says in sub D, if funds are transferred for this purpose, the designated state entity, which would be designated by the emergency board.
And you didn't end up needing to make any other thing. All this other stuff was as fast to happen.
Correct.
Okay.
On page 8, so this is a wholesale new section. This was in the technical letter. This would just be clarifying that the 80,000 that is being added for Meals on Wheels is for that purpose.
James.
Staying with page 9, this is technical letter recommended language, just explaining what the $14.5 million global commitment appropriation is for. So it states 35,226 to increase payments to area agencies on aging, 267,888 to increase payment to tier 1 enhanced residential care facilities, and then the remainder for emergency financial relief.
This is just technical changes to the,
Correct.
as proposed by
The technical letter, just recommended, adding language explaining what the purpose of that appropriation was.
okay, no, it's good.
On page 10, so this is a JFO recommendation functioning very similarly to those two previous sections. This would just be explaining that of the global commitment appropriation, in section B 333 of Act 27, 9.5 million shall be for the one-time transition funding for the first year of the payment reform.
Okay. We're okay with that.
On pages 11 and 12, this is the most recent payment reform language, so I'll defer to Senator Lyons on this. There is one highlighted section at the end that I can explain after Senator Lyons.
So this is consistent with what we looked at on Friday. The changes to the language for that are really now supported by both the agency, Dale, and the designated agencies. So it has a minimum base assumed utilization rate of 65%. After that has been put in place, then there'll be a report back and some information to help with next steps. There's also a section in here that asks the DAs to provide, to develop a financial sustainability plan, which is a good thing going forward. Oh, it's really the same thing that we looked at on Friday. It's a language, that thing. And then the funding that grading.
So in that subsection E on the final page of this packet, this is just language articulating that if funds that were previously appropriated to AHS are insufficient to cover this payment adjustment, then the Commissioner of Finance and Management shall tap the Human Services Caseload Reserve.
Just tap, actually.
Tap is unreserved an amount of funds equal to
I
the
think it's true.
deficiency.
I'd read there.
That's a new word.
I was like, wow. I like tap. Yeah. So if people remember, this was gonna come out of the 50 million, now 35 million, but this is now just saying that this is kind of why we have a caseload reserve if they can't find the money in their own budget. Any questions about that? Eden Grill Center lines, yes, no.
I wanted back to page 7 on this, but I'm not sure if now is the right time.
Yeah, now it's definitely.
Okay. And I apologize, I connected with Cameron Wood about some language about so this is the coming back to this question about the distribution of funds for the program. And so I did have something drafted up, but I can pass this out. But it's really the only part that I am of what I'm passing out, is I've also been in touch with Mr. Miles, who's working together with the State Housing Authority. The only part that of this draft I'm interested is what's labeled number 2. It says make funds available to each housing authority proportionally based on the number of housing assistance payments in use statewide as of January 1st, 2026. So thinking about ensuring that everybody has some amount of funds proportional to roughly their caseloads. But that's
But it's not the same D2.
it would be
Okay, so it's
replacing number 2. So instead of ensure that on page 7, number 2 says ensure that access to funds authorized by the section is made available to all housing authorities across the state. This would be make funds available to each housing authority proportionally.
Is proportionally equal, like what? In proportion to their.
Yeah.
For what they currently have, so to make sure that it's the same.
Right, okay. And then, as I understand it, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but if somebody does not need it, then it could just be.
Yeah, does that make sense to you? Grady, do you have any questions? Would just be swapping out D2.
Yeah.
Yep. Instead of ensuring access, it makes sure that the funding is proportional based on those that are participating in the program and getting the person. Anybody have a problem with
I
that?
apologize. I should have.
Okay, so unless somebody else has another amendment, they want to make the changes, the questions. We will have Grady make that change and have JFO go create a final bill that we can vote on. Ms. Byrne, do you know how long that would take?
No.
Do you have an estimate when we should come back to vote on the final? I'm assuming there's support for the bill, but we should vote on the final version, just to make sure.
Whispering radio.
Yeah, you guys can have a final. Sorry. Oh, section.
I'm never saying. How old do I look?
64.
No.
Yeah, people.
Well, I thought you said section.
Grandparent.
Is this a bad one reference again?
We had a conversation last year because your birthday is in April, and we covered that, who did it last?
On the record.
Are we good? Neither good?
Okay, do you have an answer?
Yeah.
You
Give
need,
us an hour.
okay,
Oh, wow.
that's good.
You want it right?
Yeah, we'll come back here at 2:10, prepared to vote.
Do we have a sheriff's meeting?
Read that.
Do we have a
Yeah,
sheriff's
there is-
meeting
no,
today?
there-
Oh, yeah.
Sheriff, it was,
We don't?
it was canceled.
Stop.
It'll be quick too.
But,
It'll be quick at 3:50.
All right.
It'll be a-
yeah, so we'll meet just to have a vote. The clerk will be prepared and ready.
Get your pen out.
Yeah, we can-
Look at that.